I don't see how this team doesn't get to 10 wins, I think. And I'm not trying to buy into all the hype just because, we've beat everybody over the head with it all offseason, but there's a lot of reasons to feel really good, even if they don't, I think, exponentially grow the way some people expect CJ Stroud to. Even if he just plays as he did last year, I think it's still a 10-win team.
I do too. Looking at the schedule, it is really tough in spots. I mean, you talk about weeks 15 through 17, 3 games in 10 days. What are we doing? What is the NFL doing? That's insane. But that's because they play on Christmas. So you have Miami at week 15, week 16, December 21st, and then 4 days later you play
Yeah.
the Ravens. So the Dolphins, Chiefs, Ravens all in 10 days. That is extremely difficult. You also have 3 primetime games altogether, weeks 9 through 11. So Chris, if this was any other team, any other roster, I think I would take the over just solely on a lot of like the back half of this schedule is really tough. I think the Texans can cruise through the first 5 weeks. They may even, I think they could start that 5-0. It'd be the first time since 2012 that a Texans team has started 5-0. I think it'd be great if at week 8 they're like 6-2. That would be fine,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Hmm.
just with the amount of talent, like on paper, this team looks so good that I do have to still go over the 9.5. I think they're a 10, potentially 11 win team, even with the tough schedule.
Yeah. And again, I think there's something to be said for the fact that this defense, which went out and got better in the pass rush, is facing a lot of young and or just not great quarterbacks early on. Like, they open up at Indy. Okay, we don't. Anthony Richardson could be fantastic. Very dynamic, obviously, but I think, like I've said, since again he was drafted, he's going to have moments that are amazing. He's going to have moments that are just, forehead slappers. Like, what are you doing? Because every rookie quarterback has those. And I still consider Anthony Richardson, only playing 4 games last year, 3.5 games basically, a rookie quarterback for the first 3 months of this season. So you get that in week 1. Then you get Caleb Williams in week 2. Great for all the storylines, right? CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, all the pieces that have been added to both receiving cores. That's going to be a great Sunday night game week 2. But again, we're talking about a rookie quarterback with a pass rush that should be much better. And then a trip to Minnesota. Again, Sam Darnold probably under center for the Vikings then. If they've gone to McCarthy that quickly, then things are definitely a mess in Minnesota. And then Jacksonville at home, Buffalo at home, at New England in week 6. I mean, you talk about a 6-2 start to the season. I could see a 5-1, 6-0 start to the season as well, just because of the way the schedule stacks up. Again, very difficult at the back end, but early on, which is usually a little easier to read as far as schedules go, because you don't know what's going to happen between now and the back third of the schedule, who's going to get hurt, what teams may not evolve the way you expect them to. I think Houston gets off to a very quick start unless unless, again, CJ Stroud regresses rather than progresses or even stays steady from what he was last year.
And I just don't see that happening. Yeah, yeah, 6-0 start. That's not out of the question. I mean, if they're 6-2 after week 8, the 2 losses are coming week 7 against the Packers in Green Bay and potentially week 8
Mm-hmm.
against the Colts. But you talk about those first 3 games. 4 total starts among the first 3 quarterbacks that CJ Stroud and the Texans are going to face. And those 4 starts have come from Anthony Richardson, who couldn't make it through any of those games. He couldn't stay healthy through any of those. He only has 2 games where he's attempted more than 12 passes in his NFL career. Also, week 4, Jacksonville. You host Jacksonville, but the Jags are coming off of a
Mm-hmm.
Monday night game against Buffalo the week before. That's going to be a really tough one for Jacksonville. So maybe they're coming into week 4 even, just a little kind of a bad spot off of a really tough game. All of a sudden, you have to get up again for Houston. So I think I like the Texans to win the division. The other team that I would take would be the Colts. And I think if you like the Colts, you wait until that
Yeah.
first third of the season, because we think the Texans are going to run through this first third of the schedule, and that probably includes a win over Indianapolis in week 1.
Yeah, and it's there's plus money on over 10.5 wins on the Texans at BetMGM. If you wanted to go with an alternate line because you're expecting them to get out of the gate quickly like we are, and you want to catch that while you can still catch it at plus money, that's out there right now on Houston. And again, I think the late bye week is a big advantage. I know
Mhm.
most teams, most coaches, I think, prefer to have that late bye because you're able to kind of lick your wounds, so to speak, going into the stretch run to only have 4 games left, 4 regular season games left after the bye. Yes, it is the most difficult portion of the schedule by far for the Texans, those final 4 weeks, especially like we said, weeks 15 through 17, the 3 games in 10 days that Kate mentioned. But to get it after the bye week, to get the bye week late, I think is a huge advantage for Houston. Although, guess what? Indy gets that as well. So their schedules are structured pretty similarly when you talk about the top 2 teams in this division. Let's, before we get to the yardage totals and some of these individual season long player props in Houston, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, even Will Anderson has a sack number posted. Let's focus on Stroud's numbers in a couple of different markets, like statistical leaders. He's 6-1 to lead in passing yards, behind only Patrick Mahomes. 7-1 to lead in passing touchdowns, tied for third at BetMGM, and fourth in the MVP market. 10-1 to win MVP. Now, we know quarterbacks make their biggest leap between their first and second seasons, right? That first full off season at the NFL level is what maximizes, I guess, their growth. But MVP 10-1, is that leaning too much, I guess, on the Texans' hype?
I think a little bit. Yeah. I would look at someone else for MVP. What I would go with Stroud would be his passing yards over, his touchdowns over. I know the 28 touchdowns versus the 23 last year. Like that's a significant difference. But Paul Gallant talked about how bad the offensive line was last year or how injured it was. Like that
Mm-hmm.
unit was just a mess. That's going to be significantly better this year, which is going to open things up. He's got so much talent around him on the offensive end. He can spread the ball around. So I think his numbers are going to be better this year than last year. And I mean, he almost went over his passing yards prop this year in 15 games last year. So as long as he stays healthy, I know that a lot
Yeah.
of the defenses he's going to be facing this year are a little bit more difficult with that tougher schedule. But I would look more towards the passing touchdowns over, the passing yards over versus MVP. There's just other guys I like further down the board a little bit better than Stroud at 10-1.
Yeah, it's not like you said. It's not anything against Stroud or not expecting him to take a step forward. It's just look at the other names near the top of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Mahomes is the favorite at 5-1. Josh Allen and Joe Burrow both at 9-1. Before you get down to Stroud, 10-1. Lamar Jackson 12-1. Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, 14-1. We talked Packers the other day. 10-1 for CJ Stroud is just the number is not big enough for me. I would need
Mm-hmm.
something more in the Love or Prescott range, like the 15-1 ish, and then I might start to think about it. Um, but again, if they get off to a hot start, then that number is going to immediately come down. And I think we probably, after examining the schedule and talking about the way things stack up for them, probably suspect it to be more of a hotter start, a better start than worse for the Texans, given the way the schedule stacks up. So if you do like Stroud that much, then again, this is a number you jump on preseason and don't wait, I don't think, to see how things shake out once the regular season starts. But 10-1, that's probably as good as it's going to get, again, unless for some reason they come out slow. The 41.75 in passing yards, yeah, I mean, like you said, he played 15 games last year and was within 60, 70 yards of that number. So I like that one. TDs, I think I like as well, although I'd probably bet passing yards before I'd bet touchdowns. But the targets, he's got anybody to throw to you could want as a second year quarterback in the league, right? Like you've got Nico Collins, who has now established himself as a true number one. You've got the veteran in Stephon Diggs, who, again, if he doesn't get whiny, could be a perfect complement to Collins, and Tank Dell, who's in his second year now. And then, oh, by the way, he found chemistry with Dalton Schultz last year as well. So there are plenty of weapons. You heard a touchdown pass to Brevin Jordan in the mix there as well during the highlights as we were coming back. They go out and get another tight end in the draft in Cade Stover in the fourth round. The weapons are definitely there for him to spread the ball around. And so, yeah, I like the Stroud props. I don't know about leading the league in touchdowns or in passing. Those seem like very short numbers at like 6-1, 7-1. What do you suspect will be their downfall, and what do you think? How do you think people will react to it? And if C.J. Stroud, for example, isn't one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year, has a little bit of a sophomore slump.
Injuries are always a possibility. I feel like if anything were to submarine this season, that's probably the most likely possibility. But going back to what I said earlier, if C.J. Stroud does have a sophomore slump, I feel like we're going to be looking for every single reason as to why it happens. I just feel like the idea of a sophomore slump for him is so far-fetched based off of what I saw last year. Again, it could happen. I don't know what the cause would be. Would it be Stephon Diggs getting mad that he's only getting targeted 12 times a game instead of 15 times a game or something like that? But even that, I'm wondering if that's going to be the case. He's come in. He's said all the right things since Buffalo traded him over here. I think that if anything does them in this year, it's going to be a defense that at times struggled against some of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Lots of changes to that defense. They've brought in a lot of new pieces, but the secondary is going to have a really tough time the second half of the year against some of those really elite quarterbacks that they're going up against. Stroud's going to have to outscore those teams. Does it become one of those situations where he's trying to do too much and he starts throwing a ton of interceptions? It's hard to believe that based off of what we saw last year, but it could happen for anybody. But I guess that's how it happens, is the Texans find themselves in a lot of shootouts. C.J. Stroud presses, makes a lot of mistakes. If that happens, I would imagine that they're going to be rolling back, though, a lot of what we've seen this year going into the next season.